Thanks for joining us in the first webinar of 2022, which is entitled "Navigating Supply Chain and the Impacts of That." This is a very relevant topic, as I'm sure you can all appreciate, and it brings about an interesting topic. There was a book that we sent out to a number of businesses throughout our footprint, and it was Built to Last by Jim Collins. If you haven't read the book, it's about visionary companies like Marriott, Procter & Gamble, also known as P&G, Walt Disney, and certainly West Shore Bank. It's really about companies that transcend time by reinventing themselves to remain relevant, but certainly staying true to their principles and their values, which has always been important to us. We've been around. We're coming up on our 125th year, actually, relatively soon. We were founded in 1898. Today's guests will share their challenges and obstacles that they've had to overcome operating a business line in extreme times of uncertainty. And certainly we've all heard about this with COVID in the last couple of years, but I think it's very interesting to hear from business people that make those decisions every day, and certainly ones that we're trying to support. There are a lot of challenges that force them to rely on some principles laid out in the book and create new principles to help them in the future. For example, in the first days of COVID, we would say in the first week or two, wait till the end of the week, because whatever we think is going to happen is going to change. And when you think about drinking water from a fire hose, you can do it. It certainly hurts. That's what was happening in the first, I'm going to call it 6 weeks to maybe 12 weeks of that period that began in March of 2020. But that's still with us today. And I think we're still going to have those challenges. We've learned a lot of important things. So when you think about the things that affect at least the bank and some of you, let's talk about interest rates. It's been a long time since we've seen interest rates rise to the level that they're at now. Mortgage rates are in the 5s and in some cases 6s, depending on the loan which you're referring to. But a lot of people look at residential mortgage lending and the cost of that. It's key because the interest cost is higher for that individual, lowering the amount of home that they can purchase in many cases. The COVID issues, they continue to drag on growth, and we've got these new variants. We don't know where this is going to go. This continues to cause uncertainty around the globe. We have labor shortages, and those are going to continue. We have more job openings than there are people that are employed. Everyone's heard about that. That's not just unique to Michigan or Traverse City or Ludington or Manistee or any of the markets that we serve, but it's really everywhere in the United States. We have continued supply chain disruption in every industry that I'm aware of, ranging from automobiles. I mean, you heard people saying, it takes me 6 months. I had the unfortunate circumstances, one of my children decided to hit something during the winter in their car. We had to wait 2 months to get the car in and then another month to get parts. So we're waiting 3 months for that car to be fixed. And it's primarily just due to parts availability. And we've got all this geopolitical stuff. I don't say stuff, it's relatively sad, but when you think of what's happening in Ukraine and with Russia and all the other countries that are kind of a part of that, and the impact that that's having on really global issues. And we're starting to see supply chain issues with Ukraine. Ukraine was a big producer of wheat, and that's now happening. Their supply is down considerably, and oil coming out of Russia is a little different than what it was in the past. At the bank, we've had all these similar challenges and have had to remain nimble and adapting new ways to serve our customers. We've had ad services, change the user experience, delivering real-time value, forward-thinking strategies. And when you think about at least our industry, it's being relevant and letting the customer choose the channel that works best for them. Some it's mobile banking, some it's online, some it's in person, some it's through a PTM or an ATM or calling someone. So we work very hard to make sure that we may remain relevant as a bank, as a financial services provider, and a partner based on what works best for our customers. Let's talk about a few housekeeping items to start. All attendees are muted for the presentation. You're certainly not on camera, which is probably good for some of you. You might still be wearing bunny slippers. We're not talking to anybody in a different time zone that I'm aware of, but there'll be time for questions at the end. Should you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A feature located at the right or bottom of your screen, and you can submit it to all panelists. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with attendees as a follow-up to the presentation. Our moderator, let's talk about Sid Van Slyke. Sid is going to moderate the rest of the presentation today. and work with the various panelists on making sure we direct questions in the appropriate manner. Sid, our Senior Vice President Market Leader in Traverse City. I'm going to turn this over to Sid. Sid, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Ray. Appreciate the foundation laid. Should be a good conversation. We've certainly had a lot to deal with the last few years. So first, I want to give a big thank you to our panelists today. Really appreciate you taking the time in the middle of what are, I know, very busy schedules for all of you. So very much appreciate the time you taking to discuss this today. And thanks to everybody who's logged in. And hopefully we can provide a conversation with some really intelligent panelists here that have navigated a tough time and give some pointers and tips to all of us succeed in a more than interesting global environment. So without further ado, let me start introducing our panelists. I'm going to begin with Bob Bramer. Bob is a Traverse City native, third generation family operator at Stromberg Carlson Products. He has served as president of the Michigan RV and Campground Association, executive board of the Michigan Manufactured Housing Association, executive committee of RVAA, and the show committee for the RV Industry Association, or RVIA. In 2020, Bob received the Jim Barker Memorial Award, which is RVIA's Lifetime Achievement Award, and in 2021, Stromberg Carlson Products was voted the RVIA's Supplier of the Year Award in the aftermarket business. Stromberg Carlson Products imports over 100 containers a year from Asia. So thank you, Bob, so much for joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time. I want to start with you with a little bit of a unique situation that because of our relationship we're aware of, and that is the idea of what you've learned through shipping insurance and its potential impact for your freight. This applies, I mean, everybody on this panel for sure is familiar with insuring freight, but I know you might be able to shed some light on an issue that our panelists or even our listeners may face that they could be unaware of. So I'll just let you take it from there.
Yeah, so your inland marine policy that covers your cargo is a lot like, say, product liability insurance. You're audited each year based on the volume that you're doing, and your rates are adjusted up or down, just depending on the volume of the product you're bringing in. And what happened to us this year is we had 2 containers on a ship that caught fire just outside of Vancouver, Canada, where we tend to bring most of our freight in to piggyback across the end to Chicago, then to Detroit. Well, that fire ended up killing somebody on that ship. Tragedy, of course. But what we didn't know was, it's like, well, we were told there was damage, and we thought, wow, I wonder how long that'll delay that container. I bet 2 or 3 weeks. They'll have a scene where they have to go investigate, and then they'll start unloading. No, that's not how it works at all. The way it works is the shipping company gets in contact with your insurer, policy numbers, etc., are provided, and then you pay back to the shipping company according to the value of the merchandise you had in those containers. So it's not a per container charge, but the value of the goods in the container. And of course, these were 2 of our more expensive containers, not 2 of my cheaper containers, right? Still, once we got a hold of our insurer, they were very aware of the situation. They did a great job in taking care of it. But then the final sting comes, and that is they don't release anybody's cargo until everybody has paid their share. So these rules obviously go way back to the 1600s, 1700s, when people were sent to go find treasure and bring it home, right? And if that boat had problems, everybody pitched in, everybody covered that, and that's just how it's done. They don't carry their own insurance.
That's fascinating. I didn't even realize that. So you're waiting on every company that has an interest in that ship to take care of what they need to.
Yes, and our carrier had multiple companies, dozens of containers on that ship. We were aware of that.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, the news did a great job of covering the looks of the shipping freighters backed up out west. And so I think everybody's got that picture in their mind. It's easy to imagine how many companies that might involve.
Yeah.
All right, next I want to welcome Cody Watson. Cody is a 3rd-generation auto dealer with the Chrysler brand, having spent his early years doing everything possible to avoid the car business, he joined the family business as an auto detailer, simply to save money to purchase his first car. Over the years, he worked his way through all departments of the dealership and eventually became general manager of a 4-store auto group. He received his BA from Northwood University in automotive marketing and business management. Currently, Mr. Watson is the dealer, principal, and president of Watson Ludington Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Ludington, Michigan. So thank you, Cody, for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time as well. I believe car dealers have been one of the industries that have received some of the most attention, I think. And maybe because your inventory is so large and sitting on the curb as we drive by, it's much more noticeable than Bob's inventory challenges that happen in a warehouse, and it's not quite so easy to see. So knowing there's been a fair amount of news around the challenges for dealers to get both new and used inventory, can you share with us any specific strategies you adopted to meet clients' needs the last couple years?
Yeah, so obtaining inventory has certainly been a challenge for all dealers. So some things we're doing on the new side, we're reaching out to previous and potential customers much earlier than in the past, trying to get out ahead of it. We're encouraging customers to place custom sold orders months in advance if they're hoping to replace their current loan or lease. Again, just trying to get much further out in front of it. And then on the pre-owned side of things, we've done pretty well maintaining inventory levels there by taking trade-ins. But we're also getting creative. We're offering to purchase customers' vehicles without them buying a new one. And then something that's been really unique that we've seen through all this is people are watching the news, they're hearing what's going on, and they're seeing the sky-high used car values. And we've actually had people coming in to sell their extra vehicle or their vehicle they're not using directly to us. So those things have all really helped, and that's kind of how we've gotten out ahead of things.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I know I've seen it from our dealers here in Traverse City and even the folks my wife and I deal with. I'm sure everybody would be of interest. What might be the kind of suggested timeline these days for, I have a lease maturing, I know I need a car when we go to family vacation, what would you suggest if you're in the pipeline, so to speak, for a new car?
It kind of depends on where the vehicle is manufactured. So if it's something that's made in the US, for us, we're saying 60 to 90 days. If it's something that's made in Mexico, you're talking 6 months, sometimes longer. I mean, we had a customer who just got his truck, actually 3/4 ton limited truck. He ordered it in June of last year and just got it. So, it totally depends. And then it's a fluid situation. So if they run out of parts, if, obviously, again, the microchip shortage is the huge thing, but it's everything from a supply standpoint. So, if they run out of hitches, if they, we get a daily email of things that we cannot put on ordered vehicles. So it might be sunroofs this week you can't get. Next week it might be the large 12-inch radio screen. So again, for most of our stuff, it's 60 to 90 days. But if it's something that's made in Mexico, you're 6 months plus. We've still got a couple of vehicles that are made in overseas, Italy, Turkey. I mean, those are a year.
Wow. Yeah, it's been one of the easiest to see is the vehicles, So I look forward to learning more about how you guys have navigated that very much. And I know our audience does too. So let me welcome Vern Powell. Vern began his career as a logistic manager responsible for inland and export shipments of canned and frozen fruits and vegetables. With years of experience in sales, importing and trading, working across the U.S., he started and founded Great Lakes International Trading in Traverse City. The company has recently increased its import volumes and packaged seeds internationally. Their volumes in both tonnage and dollar volume have been steadily increasing, regardless of the logistic challenges the company has faced over the last several seasons. So, Vern, we've known each other a long time, and I know there's a couple of stories in the history of Great Lakes where you guys have faced big shipping challenges and interesting dilemmas. This last 2 years has to present one of the craziest. But for Great Lakes International Trading, for our audience information, they import products from all over the globe. From an international perspective, you've probably seen the greatest impact of all of our panel. Any specific strategies you've taken to address the shipping specific issues you guys have had on both East and West Coast?
Well, good morning, Sid, and thank you for the introduction. About 85% of our cargo lands in the Port of New York and New Jersey. And to start with, the East and the West Coast have totally different challenges, and I'll start with the East. So with the 85% of our business inbound that comes into the East Coast, the primary problem over there is a labor shortage and turnover. During the pandemic, there were definitely delays on the arrivals. Those have mostly settled down. But now what the big problem is on the East Coast is the time it takes to get the goods off the pier into the warehouse yard, and from the warehouse yard into the warehouse itself so that we can distribute to our customers. These are all related to a labor shortage and high turnover rate in New Jersey, basically. The way we've tried to address the solutions to these is to have more direct container deliveries to our larger accounts. If they need extended payment terms, we try to give that to them to take a larger amount of volume at once. We're giving full pallet discounts to our shopping center, we call it shopping list customers, the ones that might buy 15 or 20 items on one order, and we give them a volume discount. We're also trying earlier departures from origin when it works, and sometimes that works. And we are storing a majority of our larger volume commodities, bulk commodities, in 2 warehouses rather than 1. So if we have a problem at one warehouse, they can pick up at the other one. On the West Coast, the problem remains basically getting freight to arrive. Los Angeles and Long Beach have had a consistent problem throughout the pandemic of not enough berths and not enough labor or cranes to get the containers off the ship. That makes the steamship lines really not want to call there. Since about the 1st of February, it's been really, really difficult to get a steamship line to accept the bill of lading to California. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from Thailand, China, or the Med. Most of our freight that goes to the West Coast is from Thailand and from the Mediterranean. We actually have a contract in place with a Med line to deliver to Long Beach, and we haven't put a container afloat, I think now for 30 days because they do not want to do it. They just don't want to end up there. They get stuck. So that's the difference, I guess. Regarding near term in the ocean, China's ports are basically shut down now for COVID. We think the freight rates are going to go back up, and we think the delays to the eastern port as well, to eastern ports as well as western ports, is going to increase.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, and I heard 2 really disturbing comments in the last few weeks. One was from a large mutual fund manager commenting on the media's coverage of those shipping containers that affect you guys, and his comment was, yes, it's because the ships in the ocean make for a pretty picture and it's dramatic, but keep in mind that spot in the shipping process is one link in the chain, and right now every link is damaged. And I just thought, wow, that really is. You just think of the challenge at the drop point, and it's so much bigger than that. And then the other one I heard, and forgive me because I believe this gentleman's probably listening right now. He is a large manager of supply chain for an organization, and he explained to me a stat I had never heard before, which was truckloads per driver. And right now we're hovering, or a normal time would be 3 to 5 truckloads per driver, kind of in motion at any given time. This is on the ground in the US. And late 2020, kind of in the thick of COVID, we had hit in early 21, 66 loads per driver. And I just wrapping my head around what that means. That's even once it's in the US, the challenge we have. So I look forward to kind of dipping into some of this further a little later here today. It's a big challenge. But last but not least, I want to welcome Tad Reed at Ludington Beverage. Anheuser-Busch is a fourth generation to lead, operate the business. Today, Ludington Beverage Company is 100% veteran-owned and operated. As a proud multi-generational family-owned and operated business, they have continued to lead their industry and the communities they serve. Currently, Ludington Beverage distributes their products through about 5,000 square miles in several West Michigan counties. Ludington Beverage, Budmen, sell and deliver to more than 300 customers each and every week. Major Reed cut his logistics teeth moving soldiers, weapons, and all associated equipment, ammunition, and classes of supply in Iraq, Afghanistan, and West Africa. As a Ranger qualified infantry commander, delivering the goods to the objective at a specified time and method is quintessential to mission accomplishment. Major Reed is currently the battalion commander of the 631st Troop Command out of Camp Grayling with the Michigan Army National Guard. So, Tad, for sure, first let me thank you for your service. Appreciate that more than you can know. And I want to start with you with a unique challenge for your industry, which everybody has a raw material, right? And for you guys, one of those or a couple of those has been around the manufacturer's issues with obtaining glass and aluminum, which has rolled down to shortages in specific products. How have you guys had to adjust to this to keep your clients satisfied?
Thanks, Sid. I think primarily what we've had to do is have tight-knit communication with our suppliers. We've had to focus on our portfolio and really shifting our mix, making more accessible to our retailers. We've really had to work hard on shifting certain products from, let's say, we'll use a bar as an example that has traditionally done glass bottles in a particular package. Well, at that time, glass wasn't available, so they shift into the aluminum can. And there was a period, of course, where no one was pouring any draft beer. So you had this massive spike in demand for aluminum products and large volume aluminum products, so 24-pack, 30-pack, as the pantry build happened. And you saw that mix shift from glass all the way to aluminum, and then you started to have an aluminum shortage nationally, globally, really. And it wasn't about a problem with the metal. The metal was available. It was a problem with manufacturing. So keeping up with aluminum can manufacturing became untenable for the suppliers. So they frantically began to build aluminum manufacturing facilities, can manufacturing facilities. Well, as they're doing that, and as we're shifting customers, and even some of that plastic came into the industry for the first time in a long time, you had a cyber attack on two of the biggest glass suppliers in the United States. So there was a period last year where there was virtually no glass available. And it wasn't just affecting us, it was affecting any industry that has glass bottles. Product supply has been a tremendous challenge throughout our industry. And, you know, how do we adjust to that? I think some of it has been the portfolio, adding to our portfolio, looking at not just beer, but now we're looking at waters, we're looking at wine, spirits in a can, energy drinks, teas. It's diversification. So that's, I think, one of the pillars of future strength for any of our businesses.
Yeah. I know a guy who made a few panicked buys of your product in the thick of things when we thought it might not be available later. No, I know we work with several wineries too, and they had a real challenge with the glass. And as you would assume, it's really hard on the small guy who's not buying glass by the millions and millions, but hundreds. So this is a really interesting group to me that everybody facing the same challenges, but with wildly different industries and products involved, and some higher profile from a media perspective than others. So I want to open it up a little bit with the group, um, and some questions that I think apply to all of you and probably everyone listening. So um, I want to talk about managing in times of uncertainty. And if there's anything we've been able to count on the last couple of years, it's uncertainty. And I forget which one of you said it to start, but you really didn't know, and maybe it was even Ray. Uh, on Friday, you made a plan, and by Wednesday of the following week, you were planning again because everything had changed that you made that decision on. So I'm curious as a whole, and I'll call on you one by one, but in a time of uncertainty, what new operating models have you had to implement to respond to the rapidly shifting environment is the question. And I know anecdotally we talk about a lot. I'd be curious if this applies to any of you. Several of our business owners we work with had goals that have been on their strategic plan, if you will, in some cases for a decade, that they didn't have, call it whatever you want, the guts, the time, the willingness to make a tough decision about something they thought was good for the long term of their company, but it wasn't going to be an easy thing to do. They saw COVID as the never-ending green light. Everyone's in survival mode. I get to do whatever I want to do because everyone knows I'm just trying to survive in this environment. So I'd be curious. I'm just going to go in the order you guys are in on my screen. So that means Vern first. What were some of the things you guys implemented during this from a management perspective that you found yourself having to rejigger multiple times?
Well, I think that the key changes in our model involve lead times and freight guarantees, price guarantees. So from a logistics standpoint, before COVID, you know, about the longest transit time on the sea that we had was about 45 days from the port of Izmir to the port of Long Beach, for example, or from China to New York. During the pandemic, we had ocean transit times as long as 110 days peer to peer. So basically, we started buying sooner, and we did that early on. We saw it happening, and we made a good decision to start buying as fast as we could, as much as we could, and getting it afloat. Uh, before the before this last couple of years, for us, a contract forward to buy of 6 months was occasional, and 12 months was rare. These days, 12 months is normal, but the prices, instead of being cost and freight, are FOB. So that's the first thing. From a marketing standpoint, it used to be the norm for us to at least go out 6 months and have customers knowing that their price was going to be stable for a while if they had a contract with us. That's no longer the case. I mean, we don't write long-term contracts with delivered prices much anymore unless there is an escalation clause for the freight, because the freight's just totally unknown. We don't know from day to day, frankly. So, by the way, we don't think these are improvements. They're necessities. And I don't think they're going to change much, at least until this war with Ukraine ends. So.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a lot longer than any of us want to hear.
Yeah.
And that applies to all of us, I think. I mean, somebody mentioned already, a lot of the shipping out of China's again shut down. So that backs up fast. It's like missing your connector in Chicago or Atlanta, right? It starts to unwind quickly. So I'd be curious, Cody, from your perspective, same question. What did you guys strategically do from a management perspective during this time that helped keep you rolling?
I think for us, it's been staying nimble in lean and shifting rapidly based on our customers' wants and needs. Listening to customer feedback and then adjusting our processes from there. Um, like you said, it's been a little bit fly by the seat of your pants for sure, but we've had to kind of take the feedback we've gotten from our customers. For instance, they told us that they wanted touchless drop off and delivery. So we had to add new technology, new processes to be able to do that. And for us, one of the good things is a lot of the stuff starts at the manufacturer level. So they're able to test it out at a higher level and then filter it down to the dealers. But that was one good example that, and we're still doing a lot of that where we're doing contactless test drives, off-site deliveries, at customer request. So again, it's kind of listening to the feedback, what the market is telling us, what our employees are telling us, and then trying to adapt from there. But I do agree with you. It was a little bit of a green light to kind of try things that maybe you wouldn't have tried in the past, but you did because you had to. And a lot of it, I think, is going to be the way it's going to be in the future. I mean, I think the pandemic probably just accelerated some of the changes that maybe we were dragging our feet on or afraid to make, and we were forced to do it. And now it's probably going to be the new norm.
Yeah, I completely agree. I pull it into banking for a minute here and think about, we had been discussing this idea of electronic signature of documents, right? And something we all knew somewhere out there someday we'll figure this out, but it's not really pertinent right now. And then even internet banking, those that kind of fought off the technology of taking a picture of a check with their phone or making transfers online. They preferred to walk in and do their thing. I mean, when our bank and every bank in the country had their lobby doors locked and people figured out really fast how to use that technology. And I agree, it sort of just forced those long-term trends we saw into hyperspeed. And I think that happened to a lot of us. And I think, Bob, you're in one of those rare buckets where I think COVID fed your industry to an extent. Not that you weren't still facing the same shipping challenges, but I know lots of folks ran to the outdoor space for obvious reasons during this. And so I'd imagine you faced some really tough challenges with high demand and not necessarily the ability to get your hands on what they want so fast. But staying in that same vein, I'd be curious, what things did you implement during this time that helped keep you going?
We got kind of lazy on autopilot, like Vern said, you container in 4 weeks. I remember when we got it in 5 weeks, I'd be really upset. Now it's 12 weeks, 12 to 16 weeks. That's just the norm. And as you know, like when you're financing maybe 2 or 3 containers on the road, that's just, a couple $100,000 and paying the freight. Then comes duties and tariffs that put in with the last administration. Freight's gone from, 6,000 a container. We're paying 20 right now. And because you're floating so much more inventory, like Vern, now instead of a couple $100,000 on the water, you can have a couple $1 million on the water. And that's not my freight yet, right? I don't get to go to you to say, hey, look at my inventory. You're like, Bob, is that in your warehouse? You're like, no, it's not my warehouse yet. So, we've had to get a lot sharper. We got more aggressive, like Vern said, where we'd start ordering further out. 2 years ago, you couldn't get a container. Right? You couldn't even get a container. Then you couldn't get it delivered to the port. If you got to the port, you couldn't get it on a ship because Home Depot came in and they actually took containers off ships because somebody came in with a bigger price and put theirs on the ship.
That's true.
There were so many games being played. So this year, what's happened in a lot of cases is all of my suppliers have figured out the constraints too. And now I'm getting more product in than I ever wanted. Now because they figured out their constraints, and I have the opposite problem. Now I'm financing the next 7 months of inventory. I'm not playing catch up. I'm too far ahead of the game, which, hey, having assets is nice. Vern, I hope you are correct, and Shanghai shuts that damn port down, and my competitors don't get their product. And I'll be but that's that antitrust thing we talked about, right? We talked about that. So we have an opposite problem right now. But some of the things we did do, like you say, one of my favorite factories. I've been to China many times. I've gone to dinner with this family. I know his granddaughter and have held her and had my photographs taken with Fiona. And they're great people. And when we would be visiting, you don't think you'd ever do anything to hurt that relationship, but when they can't ship because their vendors are letting them down, we ended up doing things. I never wanted to be in manufacturing. That is not my game. That's my brother's game. I'm a marketing guy, products guy. I just want to, take people out to dinner, figure out what they want, ship it to them, right? But we did reshore some products. We purchased. We now have 5 injection mold equipments. We're doing a lot of injection molding in-house. I actually do more in Grand Rapids with a supplier, but all the new stuff we've brought in here, and including our bunk ladder product line. And that was just, one of those things where every year you evaluate where your bottlenecks are, and then you attack the bottleneck. And bunk ladders, it's over $1 million a year product line for us for RVs. And so we attacked that and solved that problem by bringing that in-house. Better margins, more controls. My distributors are happy. Oh my gosh, we took a product, and because we're shipping it in the age of IKEA, knocked it down, we are saving our customers 80% of the space it used to take to warehouse these products. And as my distributors' warehouses aren't getting any bigger, right? So anything you can do to shrink inventory on their behalf, same with our dealers and their space, less damage and freight because you have a tight package instead of a lot of air inside a box. So we've done a lot of things. We've broken a lot of molds. And right now the mold is totally different. Things don't feel broke. They feel like overwhelming because of the fact that just like we figured out things and solved problems, so have my suppliers.
Yeah. And I know I can speak for Vern and you, Bob. I think you both come from that, a lot of selling, a lot of traveling, and that screeched to a halt. And what you probably learned a lot more about the other side of your business than either of you cared to. But I want to hear from Tad on the distributor front. I mean, you are shipping and dealing with the challenges there. So I'd like to know for sure what you guys were able to implement during the last couple of years to keep everything moving as best you could.
I think some of the stumbling blocks for us in our regulated industry centered around pricing. Every retailer has the same price for every product we sell in the state of Michigan. That's state law. So if Walmart buys 3 pallets of a product versus the mom and pop who buy 1 case of it, they get the exact same price. So we had to reevaluate what is the value of the delivery. So we really had to, and this is very foreign to us, where we saw every one of our customers every week without question, with the exception of those that were seasonal. But it was coming to terms with the fact that not all of those deliveries have the same value, and those deliveries have cost. So adjusting our routing, moving to bi-weekly deliveries to certain accounts, primarily based on volume and performance and seasonality. And those are hard, really hard conversations to have with customers that you've had decades of relationships of doing things one way. And I think that the pandemic is the only thing that enabled that sense of understanding on their part, and we deeply appreciate that. Adopting business-to-business technology has been crucial for our business and our industry. It's something that other beverage industries had adopted on a large scale that the beer industry had not. So we have retailers now that are able to order, think of it kind of like your Amazon app. So they can see portfolio, they can see inventory levels, they can designate, early that particular supply that they are requesting, and we're able to track all that. So our analytics has gone through the roof in the past 3 years of what we track and how we've had to adjust our forecasting models. We don't order beer, we forecast beer. And forecasting is, a science, but there's some art to it. So making sure that we're anticipating global disruptions as well is a big part of our business. There's a great 1-hour video on the Wall Street Journal called "Why Global Supply Chains May Never Be the Same." If you haven't had an opportunity to watch it, just Google it. It'll open your eyes to, what you talked about of those choke points from getting from the manufacturing facility on another continent to your doorstep or your customers' doorsteps. And the outlook is not good. Not for, you look at Bank of America's announcements this week on their outlook on trucking industry. You look at the global shipping container issues that we have. There's pain ahead. You look at commodity prices. For us, we're watching metals, and there's a shortage. So you have to anticipate those things and adopt what you need to adopt internally to offset that.
All right, so I appreciate you guys' commentary on that front. I know this conversation, we're going to run out of time. I see it already, and there's two I want to address, and I'm really torn on which way to go. I want to remind our listeners, I saw one come in, question and answers in the chat. I will do my best to get to all of those I can. So just a reminder there, if you have a question or for the end, launch that into the chat for me anytime, and I will do my best to address as many as I can. But there's a couple of big ones here I want to talk about. Every one of you mentioned price, and I'm just curious, have you had the ability to raise prices for your change in expense, and has it been able to offset most of the time, I guess is the fairest way to ask that. Do you have the liberty to, and maybe we'll go backwards this time, so Tad, I'll keep you on the hot seat here. Was somebody that many others have a lot to say about your pricing, probably more so than some of the other panelists. I'd like to know, how did you handle pricing through this, and were you able to adjust as needed and help cover the change in expenses for you?
So that's a really good question. In our industry, specifically in Michigan, wholesalers cannot charge a delivery fee to retailers. So even though freight costs were rising for us, we cannot add a freight cost to the retailer. And the retailer can add that to the customer. The customer probably doesn't know that's happening, but so there's that dynamic going on. So it's about clear communication with our suppliers. The supplier cannot dictate the price to us. They can recommend a price, and we have seen price increases recommended that we have adopted. We've seen some recommended that we did not adopt. So, staying on top of every product's price on a daily basis is critical for our business. We've got thousands of SKUs, so we got to monitor that sharply.
All right, and how about you, Bob? Have you had the flexibility in pricing to be able to manage that, or?
Isn't that a cute little tool right there? You put the price of the container right there. All the tariffs are figured out, and there's my margins. And talk about new tools, Sid. a year and a half ago was the first COVID or second COVID wave of payments that went out when inflation finally kicked in. Well, before inflation kicked in, the value of the yuan to dollar changed. So all my factories in China raised prices to us because our dollar got cheaper. Then the container started to take off and go up in cost dramatically because, I mean, if I remember, guys, that was only an 8-month period where we went from, say, like $7,800 to 20 grand. That happened fast, super fast. You cannot make that up. And then now inflation pressures for the last, say, 6 months have kicked in with aluminum packaging, paper prices on corrugated just gone up 10%. And no, I can't always make it up because what happens is I get the price increase immediately. I'm sure, Cody, I'm sure they give you a long lead time on when they're going to raise the price of your automobiles, right? Mine just happened. I'm kidding, Cody. I know you don't get any warning. And that I turn around to my distributors and I have to give my typical distributor 60 days and some of my others 90 days lead time warning. Well, we try to comply with that as well as we can, but there are just times you can't. You just say, sorry, then you don't get the product. Change it now. That's the deal. I can't ride this pony all by myself. You're going to have to ride it with me. So, and we're in a stage right now where we were good guys for a long time. Then we had a few things where we just had to ask for it immediately or ASAP. And we're kind of back to trying to recoup those costs over the 60 and 90-day periods. But we're always chasing. It happens to me first. We do try to pass it along as conservatively as possible because, like Tad's saying, there's just some products I can't raise prices on. I can't, not because of law, but I know my competitors are, and they're not raising their prices. And then I have other product lines I control the market on, and I can get a small increase and have that flyer to the radar. And I have other ones where increase. That's just what it was because we can't keep up all the time.
Yeah, I had what felt like a very painful conversation with some folks that have to price. It's more project-based pricing. So trying to figure out what your material is going to cost you, what could come in the next, and some of these could be 9 months in the making before work complete and I get paid. I mean, talk about fluctuation and just what's happened the last 60, 90 days in some materials. And you try to think 9 months out, it's impossible. So, Cody, again, everybody has a story of their brother-in-law or somebody who sold their car a year later for more than they ever paid for it. And tell me a little bit about how you manage pricing through this.
Yeah, so we've slightly increased service labor rates, door rates, which we do every couple of years anyway. So it wasn't, in response to this, I wouldn't say. The biggest difference, obviously, has been the margins on new and used vehicles. I mean, as you just alluded to, I mean, it's been the Wild West basically. So, higher margins there, used vehicle prices changing by the day. No, the manufacturer does not give us advance notice on price increases. It's about a 1-day lead time. I had a good customer that wanted to order 2 new 3/4 ton trucks. He's from downstate, was coming up the next weekend, told me basically what he wanted. I said, hey, I'll order them. He said, no, I'm coming up. We'll spec them all out. He gets here, price increase on 2 trucks cost him $3,000 over, a week. So it's definitely been interesting. The nice thing again with sold orders, we're able to price protect. So we can, honor the price that we quoted to a customer. If it's a stock order, whatever price increases they want to see. Normally, we may get 1 price increase on new vehicles a year. I think last year we had 4, pretty much across the board, whether you're talking Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram, they all increased prices. So that's, certainly been interesting. But it seems, when people find a vehicle, they're willing to drive or we ship it. I mean, we've been shipping vehicles all over the U.S. So that's been a majority of it. but we've also reduced costs. Advertising, we haven't had to advertise, which was normally probably our second biggest expense. Now it's just, do you have the vehicle on the lot? And then our floor plan costs, obviously, not having the huge inventory on lot has shrunk tremendously, which has helped offset those costs.
Yeah. I've had the opportunity to acquire a couple cars during the last 2 years, and it was just a much more interesting experience and exercise in how you do that. And I think you're right. I mean, I think we had a better experience because we specifically ordered certain things, and it locked some costs in for us compared to if you say, I'll just take the next truck that shows up, which is just so counterintuitive to 5 years ago. But no, it's interesting. So Vern, I know you guys have been messing around with my apricots a little bit pricing wise, but what else have you guys done?
Well, apricots is probably a bad example because there was a pretty significant commodity change separate from all of the logistics about apricots. But we've been real fortunate. We have mostly been able to increase our prices to reflect the increases we've had in logistics so far. Of course, we sort of have an advantage with TAD. I mean, you can't not buy beer and you can't not eat. So it's sort of that's a little bit of an advantage. But one thing we found out is that in this environment, and it's really unique for my whole career, availability has trumped price. In other words, if I had the goods available, I, for the most part, would get the price I needed. And that is really unusual in agriculture in the United States. Generally speaking, over the course of my entire career, there were more options than me, or more options than one or two, to cover your need in almost any commodity you can name that had to do with agriculture. And that hasn't been the case in the last 2 years. There's been especially on the import side. The domestic side is probably different, but on the import side, having the goods commanded the real decision. If you had the goods, you could make the delivery at a price that would work almost always. And that's a big change, huge change. So.
Yeah. And the other one, it looks like maybe we have time to get to, and I want to leave a couple of minutes for the Q&A, but I think we'd have done a disservice if we didn't talk about staffing. That is something that affects every single person on this call, and we talk about it and deal with it by the hour, it feels like at times. And what used to be a passive conversation in our credit committee was, well, I'd be lying if I said we even talked about staffing every time, but now it's a top line item. So I'd be curious to go around. Let's start with Cody. What kind of challenges did you face? You guys might have had, all of a sudden we have too much staffing. Are you short? What have you guys dealt with?
Yeah, I think again, it's kind of adjusting on the fly. The nature of our business doesn't allow much remote work, but we have tried to allow that where possible. We've done a ton of cross training of our current employees, just trying to do more with less. And really, we've been pretty fortunate. We've retained a good majority of our staff, and obviously gone across the board and increased wages to keep up with the madness happening out there. And then when we have had to hire from outside the company, it's been a little bit of everything: higher entry level wages, signing bonuses, relocation bonuses, flexible work schedules. We've offered current employees referral bonuses if they send us a potential job candidate. So it's been a little bit of everything. And again, it's changed throughout the last couple of years because obviously, like everybody, we were shut down for a short period. And then we were deemed essential. So you had, a few people coming back, but you couldn't bring everybody back. And again, luckily for us, we have great people, and I was getting calls, "Hey, when can I come back? Not can I stay home?" So that was nice, and we've been able to retain pretty much everybody. But it's had its challenges.
Well, and I'd be curious because there's a great question in the Q&A that I want to make sure we get to. But I want to get Tad. You'd be a great on the staffing front. I know you have several layers of staffing to deal with. So how about you guys? What did you see as successes? What were the challenges?
Yeah, I think our greatest challenge is in the commercial driver's license realm, where our our delivery trucks are all CDL requirement. So, with the federal law changing this year with greater requirements on the training, it really hamstrings anybody in our industry as far as CDL drivers. So tremendous more cost, a lot more time training, and it's frankly mind-boggling how the timing of it. But another place we've found challenges in our merchandisers, which would be, on our employee pay scale, would be on the lower end of the scale, and so we've had to be dynamic there and offer some incentives and be much more flexible. All the things that Cody mentioned. I think that all of us have had to adopt in one way or another. So, that's our biggest challenge, I think, is flexibility aspect.
Okay, and then I want to bring Bob in on this one first, just because in the conscious of time, and it's related to manufacturing. So since you've commented quite a bit on that, question from the audience is, there's been a very obvious 30-year trend toward globalization in manufacturing. Do you see any structural changes in manufacturing to nearshore or onshore? I mean, you are an example, right? I mean,
Yeah, we know what our good start again. We look for bottlenecks. Our bottlenecks were product lines we're already selling that aren't performing, brought them home. And it wasn't a small investment for my company. That was a lot of money. The other good blessing we had out of that is we talked to our aluminum supplier, and they backed our onshoring of that product. Last year, so I think it was Cody talked about, aluminum was not something you just got. So we almost had to ask permission, but they supported it because they knew it was coming home from China. And they wanted that to happen. We're already making a list of other products that we can do in-house. I mean, the problem, like everybody, though, you only have so many employees, which we just talked about, right? And, we've been growing at 10 to 15% a year for the past 5 years, even through COVID. And so as you grow and your space is getting gobbled up, you're trying to add staff, keep a culture, onboarding when people want to work from home. And as a manufacturer, I can only have 2 people work from home. I have a customer service person at home and my artist at home. Everybody else is pretty much here, right? So, but I see it. My friends in the industry who are similar sized companies are having me quote injection molding for them. They're having me do homework for them on rubber products that we're doing down in MESIC, and likewise, we've asked for help on how to get some programs written so we could ever bring some of our electric jacks home from China or something. How would we program hitch height and auto leveling and different things in 2 different languages, right, in Apple and in Android. So I see it happening. I do see it happening. But until like a nearshoring to go to Mexico or something like that, I know my rep does some work down there. I saw Lieutenant Ryan Callie last night at a small business function here in town that they hosted at Elfie's. And I was talking to him like, dude, we got to do more to get the big guys down there developing that infrastructure just like they did in China. And I can be a piece of a puzzle, but those big guys are 50% of the puzzle, right? And then little guys like me fill in and bring in other work that these people can do. So I'm kind of hey, and the automotive's been down there and they're doing a great job. Just wish there was more of that going on. I think a lot of people wish that now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to say thank you to you guys today. We do our best with these because we know they take place in the middle of the day. Everybody's very busy, especially you four. So it's more appreciated than I can say in words that you guys take the time and join us to have this conversation. I think it's a great one. We could have easily done an hour with each of you or 3 hours together. So thank you for everybody who tuned in. Hopefully we learned something. And thank you to our panelists today so much for taking the time. And everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Brian.
You.
Thanks loads. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thanks, Vern.
Thank you. I can't figure it. It won't let me leave.